Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.
Hello, Avaya family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you, as always, for joining us. Our fellow teachers, Dr. Ian Macnaughton and Joshua Sylvae, are back with us today to talk about a somatic perspective on childhood trauma. Dr. Macnaughton is a psychotherapist, and he's been a teacher and practitioner of mind, body, and family systems psychotherapy for over 45 years. He's an associate faculty member of City University in Vancouver and has taught at numerous universities, colleges, both undergraduate and graduate levels in psychology and in business. And he is Dr. Peter Levine's legacy faculty at Ergos Institute for Somatic Education. And Joshua is a licensed marriage and family therapist and somatic experiencing practitioner from Oregon City, Oregon. He holds an MA in clinical psychology with an emphasis in somatic psychology and is an adjunct faculty member at Prescott College, as well as faculty member for the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, facilitating the SE training in multiple locations around the world. Welcome back to Avaya, both of you.
Well, great to be with here again.
Yeah, and to be here with Joshua too.
Yeah,
it's fun to see you guys together again. I think the first time we actually ever met, the three of us, I believe we did one of these together on codependency. So I think it's so fun to do this in a collaboration again. And so let's start with childhood trauma, right? What is one thing that you believe is absolutely necessary for healing childhood trauma? Either one of you can start.
Okay, well, I think one of the things that is really necessary, and I'd love to hear you chime in, Joshua, is being able to have a sense of embodied presence, because the pull towards reenactment with childhood trauma really requires the person to be able to be really in themselves as best as they can, to be able to do the work that's necessary to repattern some of the childhood trauma aspects.
Wonderful. Thank you. Joshua, any insights from you?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is really avoiding regression. So as Ian was saying, having this awareness of our bodies in the here and now, being present to what's unfolding as we're maybe touching into this really highly charged and emotionally laden, experience. To be able to kind of have a witness as we're going through that is really key. So bringing in the body, having people able to check in on their physical experience from time to time, so we get a break from the, wow, I feel like really vulnerable and maybe feel a bit young right now, but then there's right now there's my body and here I am and here's how it feels inside. That can be really key. And then I think another thing, Ian and I have talked about this a fair bit, that there needs to be safety, and I don't know, Ian, if you have any other thoughts about safety as a sort of, basic feature of what we need to heal from this stuff.
Well, not really something that new, but I think that without safety, first of all, in ourselves, but also with a safe ally, ideally, to not, because childhood trauma is not safe by definition, right? There's not a safety. All trauma goes to, a threat about existence. It just does. That's the way it is. And to be able to find places in ourselves in and that where we feel relatively safe and building on that is absolutely key to being able to process the more, as you said, Joshua, highly activated states that reside in childhood trauma, and not to regress or reenact those states requires being safe enough in yourself to stay present.
Yeah, I love that, Ian. I love that you mentioned, right, like finding those safe spots, right? Discovering those safe spaces. I think that that's beautiful. And we've talked a lot about the body already, but let's dive deeper into that. Like, what is the toll that these childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences, take on the body specifically?
Yeah, Joshua, you
Sure.
and I were talking about some of that, and I wondered if you could expand on that, because I liked what you were talking about.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we can't really talk about childhood trauma these days without also thinking about the ACE study. I'm imagining that there'll be multiple presenters in your series here that will be referencing back to that. I think this is just such an important thing for the world to know, that adverse experiences in childhood, the things that we would normally think of as being potentially psychologically damaging or traumatizing, those also take a toll on physical health. The data is very clear, that the more of these adverse childhood experiences that you have, like witnessing abuse in the home, having parents that get divorced, all the way on up to contact sexual abuse, those events, those experiences, and the way that they seem to accumulate when we have more than one or more than a couple of these, that results in a greater propensity to physical disease. So the body is going through its own disorientation as we are psychologically experiencing, or maybe not experiencing, the echoes of the past. So even without people feeling necessarily psychologically traumatized or having flashbacks or feeling like out of control, the body might be holding the imprint of that shock, of that terror, of that deep confusion, that, as Ian was saying, the questions about existence, like, am I going to actually survive, is one of the things that I think comes up when we're in this very vulnerable little state, utterly dependent on these big people around us to meet our survival needs. So this data, I think, is really crucial for understanding that this can live in the body, and even when we've successfully pushed it away out of our awareness, there might be a way in which it's still lingering for us.
Right. Absolutely. Ian, anything else you want to share about that?
Only kind of building on the fact that there's often health physiological signs that the evidence shows is related to early childhood development and trauma, right back in utero, all the way through birth and early developmental stages, that these specific traumas of as Joshua was saying, violence and sexual abuse or divorce, also are traumatic fundamentally in the nervous system and the physiology, and create a different organization for the whole system to work optimally. And I think it's not really, even though that study really proved that, the culture doesn't really know that in a way that helps everybody have a sense. Oh, right. There's a map here that could be helpful.
Mhm.
There's a way to understand myself that, it's not all about, my lack of self-worth, or it's more about things have happened and they've had a physiological, mental, and spiritual impact.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
One,
absolutely. And I think we're getting closer, right? Every day
Yes,
we as
yes.
we
Well, and your programs are speaking to that, and bringing in different experts to kind of open up the field for people to feel more hopeful and to have some tools, right?
yes. Yes,
Mhm.
that is our goal.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Joshua, why don't you let us know what are some approaches that people can use to help themselves who have suffered childhood trauma?
mm. Well, for sure, as people associated with somatic experiencing, the healing modality, I think we can heartily, recommend finding somebody trained in SE, somebody that can, support that journey of embodied presence and healing. Um, I know that Ian also practices and has trained people in body dynamics,
Mhm.
which is a way of understanding just exactly how the body begins to reflect childhood trauma, and how you can actually work directly with the tissues in certain ways to address and support renegotiating childhood trauma. Um, there's I think a real important piece of this, which is just the recognition that it's possible that childhood trauma occurs at what is sometimes referred to in development as a critical period. That there's this way in development where we have these sensitive phases of development where we're really primed to develop particular skills and capacities. A classic example of a developmental window or critical period is language acquisition. We have this period of time when we're real little where our brain just takes on language, and it's just effortless. And if you've ever tried to learn a language in adulthood, it's really, really, really hard. But there's this period where the brain is just primed to learn syntax and grammar and all this stuff. And I think it may be a little bit the same with some of the attachment styles that we end up with, some of the ways that our disappointments in childhood and our trauma that we experience kind of create these sometimes lifelong impacts. We get conditioned as organisms are designed to do. We learn that, okay, I'm in this kind of world, and so what's adaptive is to behave in this kind of way and to feel about other people in this kind of way. So it's not always as easy as just deciding that we're gonna do life differently. Like that it's a matter of mind over matter, or that we can use the law of attraction to you know change everything. Not to everything has its place. I'm not trying to say that, but just to know that it may be that because of the childhood trauma that I've experienced, my psyche, influenced by my body, is going to have a tendency to think about things in particular ways. And so that's been helpful for me, as I negotiate being in relationships, with the childhood trauma that I experienced, that I can see the way that my mind will start to think things about my significant other or other people in my life. And I start to chew on these, wait, why did they say that? And wait, what happened? And I don't, am I safe? It can really start to take over. But knowing that now, sometimes it's as simple a matter as just saying, oh, right, that's that thing that happens for me because of the others, the early stuff, you know, and it's a different possibility with that. So that's at least part of it. And then I think also this getting in the body, you know, starting to see, get a hold of the activation cycle, you know, earlier on, very, very helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'd love it if we now dive into the body. And Ian, why don't you can share any insights you have based on what Joshua said, and then also can we talk a little bit about why is the body important in our actual healing from childhood trauma?
Well, what I think the just building on what Joshua said is it's really important in finding our own embodiment to develop ways to ground, to center, to have better boundaries, and any of those approaches that one can find that help the, an individual to be able to feel that they can maintain their ground in the midst of thinking and their center and their boundaries. And whenever they feel triggered by something in the past, that like a childhood trauma, there's a real activation of sensation in the body, and it's easy to kind of space out or tighten up or lose your grounding, not have a center, not have a core, lose your boundaries. And training those in, as we do, is absolutely so important. And a simple way is also is if a person feels like they're falling into regressing to old patterns, just put a chair in front of them and be the adult, get grounded and centered, and talk to the younger self, and then switch chairs so the younger self can give you some information about what's actually needed. So there's ways to work in that more behavioral cognitive frame, or to go for a walk with the part of you that really represents your younger self. All of those start to develop a relationship that has boundaries. And then eventually there's an integration that happens, as long as you also have some ways to be able to embrace the movements, the things, the thinking, as also as Joshua pointed out, so that you now have a different perspective, and the past is not intruding on the present, because that's really what trauma does. In some way, it intrudes on the present. So all of that, I think, really speaks to why we need to be in the body, and how important the body is, because there's the nervous system. It had a response absolutely to what went on. It can't not. So, and I wondered what, Joshua, you got something about, how important it is to be in the body?
Well, you know, one of the great things about SE and about some of
Yeah.
these somatic approaches, you
Yeah.
know, is that we get to work with pre-verbal material.
Mm.
You know, there's a way that our minds don't recall what happened to us, usually before about the age of 3. That's a you know, this domain of experiencing that I can never like consciously get back to, or at least for most of us. Some people do report memories even of birth or of being in the womb, but for most of us, you know, it's just a black space of confusion. But the part of us that is picking up information in a bottom-up way is active at that time. You know, and it's very clear that there is a part of us that remembers, you know, that in a way the body remembers. We can we can work with the imprints of things that we experienced maybe before we had words, before we're able to lay down some of those autobiographical memories, maybe things that happened when we were in these earlier ego states where we had less coping capacity. And by tapping into this direct embodied experience, sometimes we'll be able to unlock the unfinished parts of those experiences, where otherwise, if we were just relying on, what a person thinks about what happened to them, or the stories that we may have heard about our early life, which are probably coming through a distorted prism, if we were experiencing childhood trauma, it really opens up a whole new avenue of healing. I do think that work is probably best undertaken with support. So maybe not, just sitting at home and trying to reawaken my gnarliest childhood traumas. But with somebody there to hold space, we often can, really experience shifts in how we're holding those imprints from the past.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned those, right? Like 0 to 3, because that's right. So many people experience horrific traumas in that range, but yes, how do you even tap into that? So I'm glad you mentioned that like, right, you can do that, and with some of these SE techniques. And let's talk the nervous system. So obviously trauma has an influence on our nervous systems. How might the nervous system influence our ability to attach to others? And Ian, do you want to start us off on that one?
Well, first of all, we have a certain sense when we walk into a room with other people. Some people, we feel it's easier to be a felt sense of more comfort, or easier to see a person. And other ones, we're not as comfortable. And the same, so that is in a more social setting. And our nervous system is telling us bottom up, below our minds, because most of the sensory nerves, 85% or so, are coming up from the abdomen, from our whole body, up to the mind, and then we think. And so we're actually always sensate animals, if you will, of, let's say, an evolved animal in human terms is what we think, that we are sensing what's going on in the environment. And that's through the nervous system, of whether we're safe and how close can we get and for how long, and what happens to us. Do we find ourselves over-connecting, distancing, in flight, feeling anger come up? Those nervous system is the foundation for our feelings. And if we can understand our nervous system more and be curious about, oh, what just happened there in terms of my relationship with my wife? Why suddenly am I not wanting to listen anymore, or wanting to correct her, or wanting to hear more and be curious? They're all informed by the nervous system and the earliest patterns that we had of how did we find our way into safe connection and interpersonal harmony, and that so that we developed a pattern that could support us to be co-regulating with other people in a healthy way. Right? Yeah. And when there's early childhood trauma, especially as Joshua points out, all of these reactions are unconscious. They're all unconscious until we So one thing we don't know exactly what those events were often, but the body knows, and it informs us through the nervous system.
Gotcha.
And so tracking what's going on in our own felt sense and our sensate level of sensation can give us a whole sense of expanded consciousness to be able to make informed choices about what we want to do in terms of approach or avoidance, to honor our own regulating capacities. So I was wondering what, Joshua, what do you think about some of that? You're muted.
There we go.
Wow. That's, I think that when I start to talk while muted, that's often when I'm activated,
Right.
because I've like kind of lost track of things, absolutely. Everything that you're saying there is really right on target with where I would go with it. And maybe just to say, that to emphasize, as I often do for clients that I'm working with, that there's there's a sometimes deterministic influence that is emerging out of that embodied part of the nervous system. We have this autonomic nervous system. It's telling the organs and glands what to do. It's very much a physiological thing. It adjusts our level of arousal so that we can meet challenges in the environment. And when it's functioning well, it's supporting us by, putting us in the optimal state of arousal for what's happening. But when we get dysregulated, when the nervous system is influenced by trauma or accumulated stress or some other insult, we will find our autonomic nervous system going into sympathetic arousal or parasympathetic shutdown, both of which make it pretty impossible to attach, to be in relationship with other people. And so rather than people getting stuck in this, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why don't people like me? All those kinds of dead ends that people can get stuck in, on the hamster wheel with these thoughts. Just recognizing, what's happening in your body is actually the platform on which all of your thinking and your feeling and your behavior rests. And so we need to get to that. We need to start to support your autonomic nervous system to be more regulated, to come out of that stress response, of that fight or flight or freeze, that it keeps you mired in these repetitive behaviors that just really don't serve you, and about which your partner is complaining all the time, or whatever your boss is demanding that you shift out of. But just to really start to see this bottom-up influence, and that there are ways to work with that, rather than just being stuck with this project of there's something wrong with me and I have to fix it.
Right. Yeah. Well said, Joshua. I love just the emphasis on the body and how important it is for us to, get back to that regulation in order to, work from that strong foundation. And then we can, work on all that stuff, whether it's correcting our partners or being mad at our boss or whatever. So, so we are running low on time, guys. So I want to make sure you have a chance to both talk a little bit about how people can learn more about you. Ian, let's start with you. I know you have a couple of books you're giving away for everyone. Can you share a little bit about what your book is and that?
Okay. So the book is Body, Breath, and Consciousness. It's a somatic anthology, and it covers a number of different domains of approaching the human condition and human suffering. Gestalt therapy, Bowen family systems therapy, Peter Levine's somatic experiencing, body dynamic analysis, right? And So you get a variety of different perspectives around the same theme about developmental, optimal developmental functioning, the different levels of stages of life, and that may need some help at different stages, and also the issues of a different type of trauma that is more like a shock in the nervous system. And then there's kind of a weave of how those things connect. And it can be helpful in terms of developing a prefrontal neural network perspective as well, to have a map of, oh, here's these different ways of working, and there's a connection about all of them. And that connection is about the body and breath. There's some articles on the weave of how to work with your own breathing, what to notice, what to become aware of, and how really the work is, how do we expand our consciousness in our time on Earth, on the planet, and where's the places that are sort of taking us off in a different vector, a different direction, and actually what's some ways we can think about addressing those in a more somatic way, bottom-up way. So you're building a cognitive framework that a person can make their own sense out of by sort of jumping into immersing in different domains of practitioners and theories, but then it's informed by a bottom-up process. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks for giving us an overview of that, Ian. And for Avaya students watching, we will be giving away those 2 copies randomly to people who have watched this today. So we'll notify you if you've won one of Ian's books. And thank you for offering that. And how about you, Joshua? How can people learn more about you and your work?
So I have a website. It's a little outdated. I spend a lot of time these days teaching the SE professional training. So if there's people out there that are already professionals in a field that regularly brings you into contact with traumatized people, you can consider the 3-year SE professional training. And you can learn more about that at the Somatic Experiencing International website. And then there's also, want to plug Peter Levine's Ergos Institute of Somatic Education, which is offering lots of different community initiatives as well as master classes for somatic experiencing practitioners who've already been through the SE training. And can learn more about Peter and his current doings, as well as classes offered through Ergos at their website. Then I'll also just add in, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit that I started a couple years ago. And I'm going to be launching a podcast and other outreach related to prehistory and human origins and understanding the needs of the human animal. Evolved animal, I guess, as you would say.
Right.
And that's Revolve Foundation is the name of that effort.
Wonderful. And we'll have lots of links below.
Links are great.
Links everywhere. Thank
More
you.
Links.
Yeah. Thank you guys both for being with us today. I, as always, appreciate it.
Yeah, I was laughing that our first one was on codependency, and I wonder if Ian and I have a little
codependency.
Right, always together. I love it. Well, thank you both, and thank you, Avaya students who are watching or listening, just for showing up for yourself today. I always like to say that is the number one step. Showing up for yourself says so much about you that you're here right now with us, and we thank you for joining us. And we'll see you all again very soon. Take care.
Okay, be well out there. Thank you.
Take care.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this latest class with Dr. Ian Macnaughton and Joshua Sylvae. They were back with us today to talk about a somatic perspective on childhood trauma. If you've been here with us at Avaya for any length of time, you have noticed Ian Macnaughton as well as Joshua Sylvae on numerous other master classes. Sometimes they teach together, sometimes they teach separate, and I always love connecting with them. They give such great insights into all the topics that we explore. I think one of the biggest insights that I would love you to go home with today is just reiterating how important it is to get back into our bodies, right? Our body being this foundation, this place we can get started with, because if our nervous system is out of whack, it's going to be very difficult to work through our triggers and to work through the behaviors that we want to change and all those kinds of things. So just really recognizing how important it is to get back to that foundation of our bodies. And thank you as always for joining us. We will see you again soon. Take care.
Avaya has changed my life.
Avaya has made me the woman I am today.
Avaya is my home.
Avaya is personal freedom.
Avaya is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about Avaya.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, Avaya, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at Avaya is what the world needs.